Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Guess what? This episode, we're talking all about personality assessments. So we're going to define your personality assessment criteria within your organization. We want to know what kind of personality assessments we want to utilize, why we utilize them, how, etc. And so I'm not going to tell you which ones to do, but I'm going to more show you the process of exploring why, how, and when we may implement different personality assessments. So I think this is really critical because it's content that gives us data, and that data, and by content, I mean this personality assessment, it's information. And that information will help us drive decision making. And one of the things that I learned early on is that we've got nature versus nurture. So nature represents what is natural to us, in my opinion. So naturally, I am comfortable speaking, if that makes sense. Nurture is what we push ourselves to do. And so sometimes they complement each other, and sometimes our personality is there. And so it's funny, I used to think that I was an extrovert. And I thought I was an extrovert because I was comfortable speaking in front of people, and I enjoyed what I would call performing, okay? My wife showed me that I'm actually an introvert that enjoys extroverted activities. And I say that because when I am done speaking for a day, I don't want to be bothered. I want to curl up. I want to be away from everyone. It takes so much energy when I'm speaking at a conference to go to that party that night because I would much rather be home watching Netflix. And so understanding that nature versus nurture, and I bring this up because even something like, Brandon, naturally I was not good at math. Naturally, I struggled with math throughout most of my life. When I got to college, I figured out how to do it and to make it work for me. And now I'm really good at finding the story behind numbers, but it's exhausting to me. And so just because you're good at something does not mean that it doesn't exhaust you. And sometimes personality tests will help us uncover the nature, the natural tendencies of that person. Not that they can't do it. So if you said to me, nature-wise, everything has to get done. That's what fills my bucket. I got to get it done now. You send me an email, I got to reply right away. That's my nature. That's not a nurture. That's not you telling me. If you tell me not to, I will still want to do it faster. If you say, Brandon, I know you like to email quickly, but take a week on this, I'll be like, nope, because my nature is to respond right away. So personality-wise, when we're looking at these tests and these skills and these resources, what we're doing is we're looking at how they answered questions that measure ideally what then naturally comes to them. Recognizing no test is perfect, but whenever you look at these tests, you'll recognize they ask the same question in about 6 different ways because they're trying to dial it in so that you're not telling the person, you're not telling the survey what you want them to perceive. So if I asked someone, do you ever have the inkling to steal from someone? Most people are going to say no. But if you phrase it in a way of, have you ever wished to have something someone else has? Have you ever made an attempt to regain a possession of something that someone else had? There's ways for you to get that data without making them feel like a thief or like a criminal. So personality test, the idea is that we're getting some of these testing to measure the way that someone's nature, their natural function in life is, so to speak. What fills their bucket, what doesn't. So a personality assessment is a structured method used to evaluate consistent patterns in an individual's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Again, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, typically through self-reported questionnaires. Now, these assessments aim to measure psychological traits such as introversion, emotional stability, conscientiousness, openness to experience. So let me ask you, if I took a personality test and it showed that I was an introvert, does that mean that I can't be in an extroverted role? No. It just means that it might not fill my bucket in the same way. So I want to be very clear. If you said to me, Brandon, what are your favorite roles? What is a function that you thrive and love to do? I love to communicate. Put me at the front end of a brand, a company. If you give me $1 billion, I would still want to sell something. I want to be the front. I want to be the center. I want to be on stage. And yet I'm an introvert. And all that means is that I need downtime. I get overwhelmed. In a public forum, I'm not gravitating to it. But when provided the opportunity, I absolutely love to connect on an extroverted way. So don't let this drive you in one way. It's about understanding the balance they may need. So could Brandon go on a sales trip once a month, travel-wise? Probably not. I used to do it every week. If you said to me, Brandon, this sales job requires you to travel 1 to 3 times a month, I would say that's not me. If you said, Brandon, this is a quarterly trip that you'll take, that's it. 4 times a year, you're on the road. The rest is all like virtual. I'd be like, boom, baby, boom. I can handle that. So how we do this, emotional stability. I'm a fiery personality. I live with high EQ. I take things personal. My emotional stability, as I would put it, is I'm a stable person, but do I emotionally react? 100%. Conscientiousness. Yes, I read the room. I read the room very well. These are things that we're measuring in that. And so as organizations use personality assessments, they want to enhance role alignment. They want to identify candidates whose innate traits fit the behavioral demands of a position. They're improving team dynamics, combining diverse personalities in ways that optimize collaboration and minimize friction. We want to support leadership development, so pinpointing strengths and growth areas to shape effective coaching and succession planning. A lot of the times, our assessments can also help us reduce turnover. By understanding what personality traits predict satisfaction and success in your culture, organizations can improve employee fit and retention. Strengthening culture fit. Assess how individuals align with organizational values and working styles. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes you'll see that someone needs a lot of downtime. Well, I'm not going to put them in a high productivity setting if they need a lot of downtime. It won't work for them. So understanding that is really critical. That's why sometimes we find a greater trend in the personality of an OT not being able to produce at the same level as a speech or PT because of the personality that is attracted to that profession. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but just understanding that part of the role. If we were to measure and we said, hey, there's a greater capacity of occupational therapists leaving the profession of occupational therapy than physical therapy and speech therapy, it could be driven based on a personality assessment where personalities that are attracted to that profession and where they're not being fulfilled. You never know. So key definitions: personality trait, a stable characteristic that influences behavior, emotion, and thought. Conscientiousness, sociability. Then there's assessment criteria, the specific traits or dimensions chosen as benchmarks for evaluating individuals. Then there's trait to role mapping, the intentional selection of traits aligned with competencies for a given position. So when we're looking at criteria development, we want to start with our job analysis. What personality traits directly relate to success in specific roles? Then we want to filter through culture. Select the traits that complement your values: autonomy in a startup, stability in a legacy org. Then we want to prioritize adaptability. Choose traits that support future readiness, like resilience or openness to feedback. We want to make sure we avoid trait overload. So limit criteria to 3 to 5 high impact traits per role to maintain clarity and focus. So when we're selecting our tool, there's a lot of different tools like the DISC, the Big Five, the Hogan, etc. Use validated, reliable assessments. Ensure the assessment is normed for your industry or workforce segment. Integrate qualitative methods like structured interviews to enhance the depth and reduce over-resilience on scores. Now, it's interesting because my chief HR officer, Scott, and I, we were looking at this assessment tool, and we both took it, and we both disagreed not only with how we were scored, but how it scored each other. And we recognized that wasn't a tool. So when selecting a tool, I want you to take some of your people and I want you to pick 7 different people from different categories and say, do you want to go on this personality test journey? We're going to pick 3 to 5 tools. We're going to each complete them. We're going to evaluate our own results to them, identify which one best represents us. Then we're going to evaluate each other's results and identify which tool we see as aligning the best representation of you from our lens. And that will help us troubleshoot. Sometimes we need different tools for different positions. So just recognizing, hey, I may need a DISC for my admin, but I may use the Big Five for our physicians. So when we're strategizing, we need an ethical framework. We need transparency. Clearly communicate the purpose and use of the assessments to candidates and employees. We need to make sure that we're storing results securely. We're limiting access to decision makers only. We have a bias monitoring, reviewing assessment results across demographics to identify unintentional skew, and interpretation training. Ensuring our managers, our HR practitioners, our leaders know how to use results constructively and respectively. So we must do the following to implement personality assessments. 1, we need to define strategic intent. Determine whether assessments will support hiring, development, team building, or succession planning, or all of the above. Then we need to align it with business outcomes, ensure assessments contribute to measurable goals like retention, performance, engagement. Then we need to foster culture fit, using assessments to clarify how personality traits reflect or shape your organizational culture. So when we're defining the value of personality tests, a business owner defines the value of a personality test by linking it directly to performance, productivity, and cultural alignment. In other words, by how well it helps our organization make smarter people decisions that drive outcomes. And so here's an example or some examples of value potential. So 1, role fit and predictive accuracy. Value defined, can this tool help place the right people in the right roles? Personality assessments can foster behavior tendencies, helping owners reduce the risk of hiring mismatches. So example, maybe I see that this employee thrives in an environment that's consistent and routine. Well, I'm not going to put them in a home health role if they need consistency and routine, because traditionally speaking, their role will not be consistent and routine. But I may put them in a hospital. I may put them in a structured environment like a school setting. These are all ways that I may say, hey, this is the setting that you're going to thrive in based on what you want that function to look like. Strong fit typically means faster ramp-up periods, fewer management issues, longer retention, more job fulfillment. 2, data-driven talent strategy. Value defined, does it enable more objective, repeatable decisions? So are we able to do more with this objectively? Are we able to make more decisions as a result of this? Business owners often deal with the cost of biased or gut-based decisions. So I go to well, here's a perfect example. When I went to the two employees saying, which one do you want to hire? Which one should I hire? They each had a decision of which one they want to hire, which contradicted each other. They each did not feel comfortable saying who I should hire. And when I said to them, are you willing to take responsibility of me following your direction in picking who you want to hire? Neither one wanted me to give them the responsibility of that. They wanted me to take their feedback, but they wanted me to make the decision. Personality data adds structure and fairness, particularly when combined with interviews and past performance data. 3, improve team dynamics. It can improve collaboration and reduce friction. Understanding team members' natural tendencies, assertiveness, patience, risk tolerance, that can reduce interpersonal conflict, make your life easier. The other thing is business owners benefit when high-functioning teams solve problems faster and execute consistently. So even your decision-making. So what if you knew from the personality test that they prefer others to make decisions? Don't put them in a decision-making role if they prefer others to make decisions. It does not mean they can't make decisions. It means they prefer someone to make decisions. Scalable leadership development. So, can it help identify and grow future leaders? Can this personality test give me the traits and resources knowing that I can invest in their learning growth to help build them as a game changer in my organization? Personality assessments will showcase traits like decision-making style, emotional resilience, adaptability. Owners can then develop talent strategically rather than reactively. So another value potential is risk mitigation. It can help us avoid making costly mishires, mismatched promotions, etc. A poor hire can cost up to 2 to 3 times the person's annual salary. Knowing someone's default style under stress or in change scenarios protects the organization from culture disruption and stagnation. I had a client that they did this major personality test assessment, and they recognized that one of the issues with their organization was they were putting people into positions of leadership that did not actually enjoy taking responsibility over others' function. They wanted leadership, but they didn't recognize that their personality got into fight or flight when leading others. They would rather be in alignment with others or following others, but they did not want to lead. Most people, a lot of people, don't want to lead. There are more people that don't want to lead than lead. And so defining that in your group, and we need a mix of everything. So here's some skill tests that I want you to understand. A skills test measures an individual's ability to perform specific tasks or demonstrate knowledge in a defined area. It's not a personality test, it's a skills test. I like both. Personality is behaviorally based. Skills test measures skill function. So these are typically objective assessments such as simulations, timed exercises, technical quizzes. A typing test would be an example. An Excel proficiency exam would be an example. If I were to say, I'm hiring you to be a recruiter, I want you to interview 5 employees of mine to show me how you interview, that's a skills test. I'm evaluating how they interview someone. So the benefits of a skills test is it provides clear, measurable indicators of capability. Great for roles requiring technical or task-based expertise. Easy to benchmark. It's easy to measure. So interesting enough, I'm right now hiring a new graphic designer. And in order to do a skills test, I said, I'm going to invite candidates that have the appropriate portfolios to conduct a skills test of the same challenge. And I gave them the criteria of what I was evaluating. They had 1 hour to complete the task. It had to be designed a specific way in terms of like the size and everything. I gave them a brand to follow. I gave them an outcome that I was trying to achieve. And I said, I want you to design something utilizing creativity, but on brand. And I was able to evaluate different people's approach. And it allowed me to narrow down who I wanted to do the final interview with, because that allowed me to see, when I assigned them a task, their ability to execute. Now, it was interesting. One person went over the time limit and didn't pay attention to it. And so that's a red flag. One person designed more than I asked of them. And so I say, like, teacher's pet, literally was like, well, I designed this and this. And my viewpoint was, hey, I appreciate you going above and beyond, but what if you had put all that time into what the project was versus developing another project? Would I have gotten a better project? And then the third one was, the person did not finish it and they sent me what they finished, and it was a work in progress. But interesting enough, of the three, the third one that was not completed was the best of all three. They followed directions. They showed me what they could do within an hour. And even though they didn't complete the task, I understood their skill set very clearly based on 60 minutes of design. So it's just interesting. Now, the limitations of a skills test, it doesn't account for soft skills or interpersonal effectiveness. So that's why I'm doing other interviewing and personality tests and all that. It can cause anxiety. Not everyone wanted to do that skills test. Many didn't. And that's okay. And it may be too narrow to capture potential or learning agility. So what I can't measure in that test is how they take direction. How I didn't add that layer to it. So that's something I did not evaluate. But the definition of a behavior test explores patterns and how someone typically acts in workplace situations. These assessments tap into underlying personality traits, motivations, preferences that influence performance and collaboration. Examples: the DISC profile, situational judgment tests. These are going to benefit you by revealing how someone is likely to respond under pressure or change. It will enhance team building by understanding interpersonal dynamics. Useful in leadership, development, cultural alignment, can identify potential beyond technical capability. Now, the limitations: responses can be influenced by social desirability or self-perception bias. Again, what was my self-perception bias? I thought I was an extrovert because I liked to speak on stage. Interpretation requires trained professionals often for these tests. They may not predict task-specific success, and the results should be one of multiple data points, not sole decision makers. So I never want you to just live off of a behavioral test or a skills test. And so when to use which, etc. Hiring for technical roles, I think a skills test is critical, whereas a behavioral test is supportive. Leadership develop, I think a skills test is supportive, but I think the behavior test is essential. Cultural fit evaluation, I think a behavioral test is the primary focus. A skills test is helpful. Training needs analysis, we must do a skills test. And then a behavioral test can supplement. Succession planning, not sufficient for skills test, but behavioral tests are predictive of leadership styles, so they're very helpful. Now, I will tell you, with succession planning, sometimes a skills test can allow us to know what skills they already have for other roles that they could succeed at. So it is helpful in that succession approach. Personality assessment toolkit for healthcare practices. So the big five is one. It is a trait-based assessment grounded in decades of psychological research, measuring 5 major dimensions of personality. Why do we use it? Strong empirical validity and predictive accuracy. So it's ideal for understanding work style, stress response, and interpersonal compatibility. Highly adaptable to both clinical and administrative roles. Best used for hiring, leadership development, succession planning. The DISC, this is one of the more readily utilized tools. It's a behavior-oriented tool that categorizes how people approach tasks and relationships. Dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. Why do we use it? It's easy to interpret, it's easy to implement, it's cheap, strengthens communication, collaboration across roles, especially helpful for operational and customer-facing roles. I like to use it for team building, onboarding, and conflict resolution. Then we've got EQ, the emotional intelligence assessment. It measures emotional and social functioning, including empathy, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. So one of the things that I find is when we have someone that has extra empathy, it can make managing others harder. So when someone has too much empathy, they're not able to uphold the expectations of the job. Like, hey, I'll give you an example. I have a physical therapist that is managing the production of 5 therapists. And every day the therapists come in with, well, my kid got sick last night or whatever. That physical therapist is so empathetic that they can't even be like, well, how can we create a solution to solve this? How do we get this up? How do we change this? They make excuses on behalf. Now, empathy is important, but how we channel it into accountability is critical. So when we use the EQ I2O, we want to use it highly relevant to patient care, leadership under pressure. It builds compassion-centered cultures and psychologically safe environments. This is often used for clinicians and practice management and leadership pipelines. I don't use this, though, with my medical billing director, just so you know. Personality assessment toolkit for healthcare practices in terms of the next one I want you to look at is Hogan Personality Inventory, the HPI. So this is a workplace behavior predictor assessing performance traits and potential derailers. Why do we use it? It highlights how someone performs under pressure. I'm going to repeat that again. It highlights how someone performs under pressure. It flags risk areas like poor coachability, interpersonal strain, validated for leadership evaluation and role fit. It's so important. So I like to use this for executive hiring, succession planning, and culture shaping. Another one is situational judgment tests, SJTs. So this simulates real-world, role-relevant scenarios to assess how someone might respond. It adds behavioral realism to hiring. It screens for sound decision-making, empathy, and value alignment. I find this is often used for frontline clinicians, patient intake roles, ethical decision-making, etc. The most radical one that people have been using lately is the Enneagram test. This is a typology model that categorizes individuals into 9 types based on core motivators, fears, and growth paths. So why do we use it? Exceptional for self-awareness and interpersonal insight. It promotes deeper team understanding and emotional agility, and it fosters reflective leadership. So it helps with intentional team culture, kind of cultivates that culture as a group. And so this is used for executive coaching, retreat sessions, burnout prevention. It is used as a supplementary tool, not hiring or formal evaluation, in my opinion. So how do we build transactional and transformational analysis of leaders? To build a meaningful transactional and transformational leadership analysis, especially in a private practice or organizational setting, you'll want to approach it as both a diagnostic and developmental tool. So the 2 different levels, we've talked about it. Transactional is focused on structure, supervision, performance-based rewards. Leaders operate through clear expectations, rules, and exchanges. Effective for maintaining stability, efficiency, and short-term goals. Now, transformational leadership inspires and motivates through vision, values, and emotional connection. It elevates followers' aspirations and aligns them with organizational purpose. It drives innovation, engagement, and long-term growth. Define key indicators for each style. So we've got a motivational style. Let's say transactional indicators are going to be rewarding, punishing, compliance. Transformational is inspiration, shared vision, empowerment. When we're looking at a transactional leader, communication style is a little more direct and task-focused, whereas transformational is visionary and emotional. Change orientation, risk averse is usually transactional, whereas transformational is a change agent, future focused. Team engagement usually comes from role clarity and accountability when you're transactionally minded. Transformational is a little more trust building and personal development. Decision making is going to be rules-based, top-down. For transformational, a little more inclusive. I am a transactional leader that adds transformational communication. plain and simple. That's how I operate. So we want to assess our leaders using mixed method, using tools like the multi-factor leadership questionnaire. That's an MLQ. It will measure both styles, get 360-degree feedback, gather input from peers, direct reports, and supervisors. Utilize behavioral interviews. Ask scenario-based questions to reveal default leadership tendencies, and then track how your leaders respond to conflict, change, and team challenge. The next thing I want you to do, I want you to analyze. I want you to interpret. Plot your leaders on a spectrum. Most leaders exhibit both styles to varying degrees. Identify dominant tendencies. Are they more reward-driven or more vision-driven? Contextualize it. Consider the demands of the role. Some positions require more transactional structure. Others require more transformational influence. And then step 5, we want to apply insights for development, balance both styles. So effective leaders flex between transactional and transformational depending on the situation. I said transactional by nature, transformational by nurture. That's how I operate. Tailor coaching. You want to help transactional leaders build emotional intelligence. You want to help transformational leaders strengthen the execution and accountability. And then you got to bring it all together, align it with your organizational goals. Use the analysis to inform succession planning, team design, and leadership training. Did you know that 92% of small businesses using Big 5 personality tests for hiring reported consistent results in predicting employee performance, compared to 65% for Myers-Briggs tests, highlighting the Big 5's superior reliability? That was from Test Gorilla, the state of skills-based hiring in 2024. So, inspired by Daniel Pink, who I love, personality assessments unlock the unique strengths of your team. Use them to build a workforce that shines together and drives your business forward. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. Together, we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you loved this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.